You can tell, like if I got like about 400 of you here, if I all had you write down as many words as you can that begin with the letter S in 90 seconds, and we rank ordered you by how many words you generated, we'd get a rough rank order of your creativity as well. And some estimation of your verbal intelligence, but it would be a better measure of creativity, at least creative thinking. And creative thinkers think laterally. And so what happens if you're a creative thinker is you'll have an idea and then it'll give rise to a bunch of other ideas. So you have loose associational networks. That's another way of thinking about it. You know, someone who's not creative, if you toss them an idea, another idea won't rapidly spring to mind. Or if it does, it'll be an idea that's quite close semantically to the original idea. Whereas if you're a creative person, you'll hit an idea and you'll jump way over here, and that'll remind you of something way over here, and that'll remind you of something way over here. And a lot of creative thinking is bad thinking. You know, well, it is. Look, I mean, it's an important thing to know if you're a creative person, because it's really hard to monetize creativity, right? Because first of all, most of your ideas are bad. They're just not well thought through. You haven't criticized them. Even if they're good ideas, the probability that there's a market for them is quite low at that time and in that place. And like, what do you know about marketing anyways? And then you have to communicate them. And like, it's really, the pathway from creative idea to profitable creative product is so long that it's almost never that the originator of a creative idea monetizes it. And so that's a very dismal proposition for people who are creative. It's very, like, creative people generate all the new ideas, right? But they hardly ever monetize them. Other people monetize them. So it's a hell of a thing to be a creative person, except that it's interesting. Anyways, that's the thing. That's the payoff, right? It's interesting. If you have an interesting life, if you're a creative, maybe too interesting. So when we had been studying, so we decided to study creative achievement. We put together this questionnaire called the Creative Achievement Questionnaire. And what we did was we identified 13 dimensions of potential creative production. Things like culinary, architectural, entrepreneurial, financial, dance, drama, art, literature, etc. I think there was an invention category. Anyways, we covered the creative domains pretty well. And then we had experts. We ranked different, what would you call it, strata of accomplishment. So 0 would be, I have no training or recognized talent in this area. And like 10, I think it was on a 10-point scale, would be, you know, I've won an international prize for my work in this area. And then we gave it to many, many, many people and looked at IQ as a predictor. IQ is a very good predictor, by the way. IQ predicts almost everything that involves complex cognitive operations. And IQ is the most powerful predictor social scientists have ever found for anything, period, by a factor of about 4. There's one exception. The correlation between inequality and male homicide is about 0.9, and that's the highest correlation between two things I've ever seen. But other than that, it's IQ. And so IQ was a good predictor. Trait openness in the big 5 sense was a good predictor of creative ability. But one of the things we found was that the distribution of creative achievement was not normal. You know how a normal distribution works is most people are at the average, and then a few people are at the tails. And that applies to IQ, and it applies to height, it applies to weight, and it applies to the big 5 traits. And there's a truism in psychology that most phenomena are normally distributed. A truism in statistics, actually, that most phenomena are normally distributed. But creative achievement is not normally distributed. And neither are any of the phenomena that are associated with creative production in general, including the distribution of money, for example. You know, the 1% has a tremendous, the 1% has a disproportionate amount of wealth. And then if you take the 1% of the 1%, they have a disproportionate amount of the wealth that the 1% has, so that it's something like 85 people have as much money as the bottom 2.5 billion. It's something like that. And you think, well, that's a terrible indictment of the capitalist system. And no, it's not, by the way, because the problem of inequality, which is a real problem, is way more serious and difficult than the problem of capitalism. Because inequality is a much more fundamental phenomena, because it manifests itself in all sorts of areas that have nothing to do with sociology or politics or economics. It manifests itself everywhere. Now, and what we found with the Creative Achievement Questionnaire was everyone stacked up at 0. It's like across the 13 dimensions, 70%, 70% of people scored 0, and about 10% scored 1. And and you could easily score like 60. People scored 60 on the creative achievement test, so the distribution looked like this. Everybody stacked up at 0, and there's a few people out here, and they were doing everything. And that's what you see. You see that in scientific publications. You see it in hockey goals scored. You see it in number of compositions written. Like how many classical compositions have you written? 0, right? None. Right. And then you have J.S. Bach, who wrote so many classical compositions that if you hired a competent copyist just to copy what he composed, it would take them 40 years of 8-hour days. So that's J.S. Bach. And then Picasso, here's an example. So Picasso, you're no Picasso, well that's for sure. How many paintings have you painted? 0. How many paintings did Picasso paint? So artworks. How many artworks did Picasso produce? 65,000. Right, so 3 a day, every day, for 65 years. Right, and think about it, it's just absolutely beyond and these were Picassos, right? Right, no, but I'm dead serious. You think, yeah, he's whipping off some sketches. It's like, no. You can go online, you can find the online Picasso archive, and there's 15,000 of his pieces of art. Last I checked, which was a couple of years ago, it's probably more like 20,000 now. And it's just staggering. You just cannot believe that someone could possibly do that. And really, that's the way of the world. And so this old guy, he told me about the Pareto distribution, and that blew me away to begin. So that explained the creative achievement questionnaire distribution, because we didn't know. It's like, what the hell? This is supposed to be normally distributed. It's not even, it's not normally distributed at all. Everybody stacks up at 0.